I have sat in a lot of waiting rooms in my life. Cold hands, a blood pressure cuff a little too tight, a nurse who calls you on no matter how old you are. I never once thought a waiting room would be the place my marriage actually ended. It didn't end with shouting. It ended with a photograph in a cheap gold frame, sitting on a stranger's desk, catching the light wrong. Welcome to Dad's Pure Revenge. If you're new here, drop where you're watching from in the comments. I've been hearing from folks all over the country lately, and I like knowing who's listening. And if stories like this one mean something to you, go ahead and hit subscribe, because there's more coming. My name's Russell Combs. I'm 54. I run a small HVAC business out of Dayton, Ohio. 3 trucks, 6 guys, 22 years in. I've never been the kind of man who pays close attention to details that don't involve a furnace or a compressor. That's the honest truth of it. I'll fix a stranger's air conditioner down to the last screw and not notice my own wife hasn't looked me in the eye at dinner in 6 months. No, I'm telling you that up front because it matters later. My wife is Denise, 49, works the front desk at a dental office on Wayne Avenue, makes a lasagna that her own mother used to make, and for 18 years she has been, as far as I knew, the steadiest person in my life. She's the one who remembers the neighbor's dog's name. She's the one who drove 4 hours to sit with my sister the week our dad died and didn't say a word about it afterward. Like it wasn't a big deal that she'd given up her own weekend. That's just who she was to me. Or who I thought she was. Here's where the crisis starts. Tuesday, March 3rd, 6:15 in the morning. I woke up with a pain in my chest, like somebody had set a cinder block on it. Denise called 911 herself, rode with me to Miami Valley Hospital, held my hand in the ambulance, and didn't let go until they wheeled me back for tests. Turned out to be a mild cardiac event. Not a full heart attack, but close enough that my regular doctor referred me to a cardiologist for ongoing care. Dr. Preston Wade. Nice office on Far Hills Avenue, 2nd floor. Good reputation. The kind of guy patients call great with people. I want to be clear that at first, nothing about Dr. Wade seemed wrong. He was thorough. He asked good questions. My first 2 appointments were unremarkable. An EKG, some blood work, a conversation about cholesterol I mostly ignored. It was the 3rd appointment, April 14th, a Tuesday, 2:40 in the afternoon, when everything changed. I was sitting in his office waiting for him to come back with results, and I noticed a photograph on the corner of his desk, half turned toward his own chair, in a plain gold frame. A woman in a red dress, laughing at something off camera, hand resting on a porch railing I recognized, because it was my porch railing. It was Denise. I sat there and looked at that photograph for what felt like 10 minutes, but was probably closer to 90 seconds. I remember the second hand on the wall clock ticking past the 9, then the 10, then the 11, and I remember thinking, very calmly, that there was a simple explanation. Maybe Denise had mentioned him at some point. Maybe they'd met at a work function. I built 3 or 4 innocent stories in my head in the time it took him to walk back through the door with my chart. When he sat down, I pointed at the frame and asked him, plain as I could manage, "Who's that?" His face lit up. Genuinely lit up, in a way that told me everything before he said a single word. "Oh, that's Denise," he said, smiling like a man who talks about someone he loves. She's someone very important to me." My heart did not stop. Whatever the thumbnail told you, it did something worse. It kept beating, steady and normal, while the rest of me went completely still. I didn't yell. I didn't stand up. I said, "Small world," and let him keep talking, because I wanted to hear how far he'd go without knowing who I was to her. He told me they'd been seeing each other for almost a year. He used the word "we" like it was the most natural thing. He mentioned a trip to Charleston in October. I remembered that trip. Denise told me it was a work conference for the dental office. I remembered because I'd offered to drive her to the airport and she'd said no. Her coworker Priya was picking her up. I finished the appointment. I shook his hand. I walked out to my truck in the parking lot on Far Hills Avenue and sat there for 11 minutes before I turned the key. Here's the thing that still gets me. When I got home that night, I didn't say anything. I made dinner. Denise came in from work, kissed me on the cheek like always, asked how the appointment went, and I said, "Fine. Good news, actually." I watched her set her purse down on the same chair she always sets it on. And I thought about that red dress, and I said nothing. That was my mistake, if I'm honest about it. Not the not knowing, but the 2 weeks after I did know, where I kept driving her to her hair appointments and paying the mortgage and acting like a man who didn't have a photograph burned into his memory. I told myself I was gathering myself. Really, I think I just didn't want it to be real yet. The person who saw something was wrong before I let myself admit it was my daughter, Casey. 26, works as a vet tech over in Kettering, comes by every Sunday to help me with the books because she's better at math than I've ever been. Sunday, April 19th. She noticed I'd barely touched my coffee, and she just sat down next to me at the kitchen table and said, "Dad, you've been somewhere else for 2 weeks." I didn't tell her everything that day, but she didn't push either. She just stayed another hour, helped me finish the invoices, and said, "Whatever it is, you don't have to carry it by yourself." That's Casey. She's said some version of that to me, more times in my life than I can count, and she's never once asked for anything back. I want to pause here and say, if you've ever had someone in your life who shows up without being asked, without wanting credit for it, let them know. Comment below and tell me who that person is for you. It matters more than you think. The switch didn't flip because of rage. It flipped on a Tuesday morning, April 21st, when I was going through our joint bank statements for a business loan and found a payment history to a storage unit on Wilmington Pike I'd never heard of, paid for in cash increments every month for the last year. $51 a month. Small enough not to notice on a shared account. Big enough that it had been running for 51 weeks. I didn't confront her. I just drove out there on my lunch break and used the code Denise still had taped inside her old day planner from years back. Force of habit. She never changed her codes. And opened Unit 114. It was full of things. A box of cards signed Preston. Photographs. A weekend bag already half-packed with clothes I didn't recognize. And underneath all of it, folded flat, divorce paperwork already drawn up by a lawyer, dated back in February, a month before my chest pain, a month before any of this started for me. She'd been planning her exit for 2 months, and letting me pay for it the whole time. I didn't call a lawyer that day. I didn't confront her that week. I did something quieter. I went to my own attorney, a woman named Glenna Ashford who's handled our business contracts for years, and I asked her to help me update my estate plan, the deed to the shop, my portion of the house, and a life insurance policy that had named Denise as sole beneficiary since 2009. It took 11 days to finalize. Glenna asked me twice if I was certain. I told her I'd never been more certain of anything. I split it 3 ways. A third to Casey, outright, no conditions. A third into a trust for my sister, who Denise had once called difficult for needing help after our dad passed. The same sister Denise drove 4 hours to sit with, the same sister who'd been quietly cut out of every family conversation since. And the last third to the Dayton VA outreach program, because my own father had used their services in his last years and nobody in my family had ever properly thanked them for it. Denise found out on a Thursday, May 7th, when she went to pull up the life insurance policy for what she thought was routine paperwork and found her name gone. She called me 11 times that afternoon, then 29. By evening, it was 34 missed calls, and by the time I finally answered, it was 38. She had no idea what was coming. She would, soon enough. I met her at the house that Friday evening, May 8th, 6 o'clock sharp. She came in already talking, already building a case before I'd said a word. How could I do this? What was wrong with me? Was I trying to punish her? I let her finish. Then I set the storage unit key on the kitchen table between us. She stopped talking. I told her about Unit 114. I told her I knew about Preston, knew about Charleston, knew the divorce papers were dated February. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. She started crying, and for the first time in 18 years, I watched her cry and felt nothing pull me toward comforting her. Not coldness, just an absence, like a phone line finally going quiet after years of static. She asked if there was any way to undo the estate changes. I told her Glenna had made sure there wasn't. What I didn't expect was Dr. Wade's part of it unraveling entirely on its own, without me lifting a finger. Denise, in her panic, called him from my kitchen, and he, apparently unaware she was still legally married, believing her story that the divorce was long finalized, said something on speaker that she never meant for me to hear, about how he couldn't have this come back on his practice. Turned out he wasn't just a cardiologist with bad judgment. He was a cardiologist who'd been carrying on with a married patient's wife while treating that same patient for a cardiac condition, a conflict serious enough that when I later filed a complaint with the Ohio State Medical Board, they took it seriously. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because the next man in that waiting room deserves a doctor whose attention is where it should be. Denise moved out at the end of May. The house on Maplewood Court got quieter, in a way I didn't hate. I still see her name on Casey's phone sometimes when they talk, because Casey didn't cut her mother off, and I never asked her to. That's not my forgiveness to give or withhold on her behalf. I'm not going to tell you I feel peaceful in some soft, tidy way, because that wouldn't be honest. What I feel is steadier. I don't check her location anymore. I don't wonder about storage units or Charleston or red dresses. My cardiologist now is a woman named Dr. Alicia Farrow, 2 floors up in a different building entirely. And there's no photograph on her desk except one of her own kids at a lake somewhere. I notice that now. I notice a lot of things now. If there's a lesson in any of this, it's not about revenge. Not really. It's that the quiet years matter. The $51 a month nobody questions. The trip you don't ask enough about. The boundary you never set because you didn't want to make waves. Pay attention to the quiet years. That's where the truth usually lives. If this story meant something to you, hit like, subscribe to Dad's Pure Revenge for